So 3 weeks ago, when I was at the Liberia National Infrastructure Conference, right, after a panel discussion, somebody leaned into me and asked me this very interesting question. Is Africa's solar market really exploding? Or are we just getting better at telling the story? And that question made me laugh, but it stayed with me because after reading both the AFSIA Africa Solar Outlook Report 2026, but also the Global Solar Council Africa Markets Outlook from 2026 to 2029, I could say that the honest answer to this question is actually both. And the apparent tension between the two reports is exactly what makes this moment so important. So today, there's three things I want to do for you. I want to unpack why the numbers are so different, what each report really means, right? What they're really saying. And the third thing, which is more important, what the gap revealed about Africa's true solar trajectory, right? Because this is no longer just about the megawatt, guys. It's about the architecture. And I want to talk to you more about that in just a couple of minutes. Yeah? Stay with me. Hey everybody, how are you doing? My name is Tony. I'm the founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa. What we do, very simple. We raise awareness about renewable energy and sustainability. So if you're interested to expand into Africa, we are your eco bridge to this market and we can help you with three things: the visibility, the leads, and the deals. Or if you want to decarbonize, we gain your eco bridge to sustainable pathway and we can help with carbon footprint assessment and carbon reduction strategy. But also, if you're looking at carbon project, right? So reach out to us because we launch our platform AfroCab, help you to connect with global buyers and to promote those projects, across the globe, right? And to global buyers, right? And that's what I want you to do. If you have a project, definitely feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about that. So today, I want to start by looking at numbers, right? Because numbers speak, right? So according to the Global Solar Council, so GSC. So Africa has added 4.5 gigawatt of new solar capacity in 2025. So if you look at what was achieved last year, this is a 54% increase year on year. So, and that's actually what I could share in here. So 54%, right? That number, that's what it represents. It's a strong year. It's a record breaking according to GSC. And it's encouraging. But Africa still represents a small fraction only of the global investment. Now, I want to contrast that with what AFSIA has said, right? And you can see already here, for example, AFSIA has reported 2.4 gigawatt. That's what's reported. Doesn't mean that that's what is there, right? And that's where everything become quite interesting for me. Because if I go back a little bit and look at another slide that I want to share with you, another data. So what we see here, it's AFSIA has two approach, right? There's a bottom-up database. They have identified, cumulatively 23.4 gigawatt of operational project. But when you combine this data, or sort of across this data, with the Chinese PV export data and the data, because they work with a company called Amber, Amber was able to export the Chinese PV export data. So, and those PV export data, they track about 90% of global module supply. And when they combine all those informations, so AFSIA estimate that Africa may actually have already installed host 63.9 gigawatts of installed capacity. Let that sink in. 63.9 gigawatt of installed capacity is almost 3 times as much, right? So I wanted to really observe that. So 23 gigawatts versus 64 gigawatts. This is what we're talking about here. And that's what I'm showing here on this graph. 23 on one side, 64. So the question becomes, so which one is real? And by the way, this is not a rounding error. This is a different picture of the reality. So which one is right? So that's the question I'm sure you want to ask me. Are we going for the 63 or the 23, or the 64 or the 24? Which one is true, right? That's a very interesting question. And that's what today, like I say, I really wanted to have this conversation with you to have this kind of conversation, right? Discussion. So the more strategic questions, because like I say, those are two different picture of reality, right? And the more strategic question is, what are we actually measuring? This is what the more the question that I believe we need to ask ourselves when we look at those different figures, right? And what I can say is GSC, the Global Solar Council, they largely measure grid connected, reported project, utility scale, and officially commissioned project, right? Whereas when you look at what AFSIA has done, so they've actually used two approach. The bottom up verified project, these are the projects they've been able to go around, check, make sure that they're there. That's fine. They report it. That's what we've seen. That's what you had the 2.4 gigawatt that they reported. But also the top down, right? So this is where work with Amber, they were able to track, like I say, the Chinese PV export data, right? So the module import flow, that's what they've done. And here is for me the very crucial difference. Solar in Africa does not wait for the perfect reporting system. That's one of the key lessons that we can actually pick up from those numbers. When we look at the 24 gigawatt on one side, but 64, which actually may actually be already be on the ground in Africa. It's that the continent, like it has done for example for telecom, does not wait for the perfect system, for the perfect reporting system. Yeah. So rooftop factory, they need to work. Telecom towers, mine, CNI warehouses, farm, beyond the meter system they installed because the grid is unreliable. So that's the reality. What are you going to do? You run a business and you know that you have a challenge, right? You don't have power. You're not going to wait for somebody to say, hey, let me make sure that I can report your system before you go ahead. No, you need to make sure that your factory is working. You need to make money. You need to pay people, so on and so forth. So this is this demand pressure, this reality pushing people to install system, right? And much of it never make it to the official statistics. That's what we come to understand. But the panel are there to generate electrons, and the gap isn't a mistake to me. So that's what I could definitely see. And I'm saying that because it's I have a little bit, I want to say, anecdotal fact as well from my side. So I have one of I would say a client I'm working with, and I know from a fact because I've seen it for myself the data. So they built over time over the last 5 to 10 years a 60 megawatt plant in East Africa, but the client has purposely asked them not to report it because they don't want to be reported for whatever reason. I don't know, but that's one thing that I'm saying. So this is part of the data that sometimes are on the market but are not on the official statistic. You see, this is what we're talking about here. So the generate electrons and this gap, like I say, is not a mistake. It's actually a signal. That's what I want to say. So both reports for me. So despite the methodological differences, they converge as well one point. And this is also what we need to pay attention to, right? Is that distributed solar is no longer marginal. No. In fact, when we look at, I'm going to show us maybe my third slide in here, and we could see that GSC, what they're doing, they are noting that 44% of the new capacity addition came from distributor segments. And to some extent, AFSIA also supporting this kind of fact that there's a lot of unreported CNI sectors, a CNI project out there that don't make it to official statistics, but they're there, right? So AFSIA goes further. They're assuming that most of unidentified capacity, the difference between those 23 gigawatt and 64 gigawatt, the most of it's unidentified capacity sits in the CNI and residential segment. Yeah. So what does that mean? So it simply means that Africa is not just building power plant. It is quietly redesigning its power system. And here is what it really matters for you listening. Yeah. So it means that distributed solar scale faster. It's demand driven. It is not policy driven. They're not waiting for any politician to say, hey, let me pass this law to make it easier. No, they have an urgency on the ground, right? And they need to find solutions. And like usually they would do, African, they're very resilient, they invent solution. So distributed solar scale faster, is demand driven, not policy driven. It also pairs naturally with storage and respond as well to unreliable grid. And this is not ideology, like basically what I'm talking to you here. So this is definitely what we see. This is pragmatism. And I'm going to give you, for example, two examples that I believe illustrate that really well. You know, for example, in South Africa, so load shedding. So if you've been to South Africa, I'm sure you've heard it a lot of time. So load shedding, accelerated, CNI solar installation dramatically between 2023 and 2025. And I know, for example, one of my very good friends here, so Jay, who's leading company, so in power. So I know business was booming around that time for them because business couldn't wait for grid reform, and solar plus storage became survival infrastructure. And also because solar costs dropped significantly, and it made things a lot easier. I think if I look, for example, another slide that I have to share with you. So let me see if I think I have it later on the slide, so you'll be able to see the cost of storage actually falling drastically, making it much more interesting for people to install to install solar. Yeah, and this is what we see. So it became a survival infrastructure. That's what we saw. That was in South Africa, and in Nigeria. So the GSC report also that the distributed capacity, they've grown over 100% in 2025. And by the way, that's not donor-led electrification. This is market-led response, right? This is market response. That's what I'm saying. And here is the biggest shift, is that Africa energy demand is growing. It is not plateauing. That's what we see now. And that also justify why you see the growth of the continent. It's going higher, right? Unlike Europe, unlike part of Asia, solar here is not replacing legacy system. No, it is becoming a B system because power is missing and they need to find power somewhere, and solar is there to plug the gap for them. And that is what it's very interesting for me. So now I want to zoom out a little bit, because AFSIA trade flow analysis as well, they show that Africa is one of the fastest growing solar region globally, with double digit, combined average growth rate since 2021. And if I go back to our graph in here, so we could actually show that, yeah, and we can show that if you're looking at the continent compared to other uh, other places in the world, you can see that here, that is Africa for you. So it's going much faster. If I go for it, make it slightly bigger for you, you see. So Africa, it's 49%. That's the cumulative average growth rate, and that is quite significant, right? So if you compare to other part of the world, Asia 15%, Europe 18%, and North America 17. So definitely things are going a lot faster in Africa because, like I say, it's urgent infrastructure that we need over there, and solar is there to plug the gap, which is a good news for us. But at the same time as well, so as much as solar is accelerating, what we're also seeing still is that the the continent of Africa attracts only 2% of global clean energy investment, and the contrast is striking. On one side, you have 49% acceleration, right, of the market, year on year, and then on the side, only 2% of global clean energy investment. And one of the reasons for me could also be simply because, as I've been saying to you, that we're looking at the wrong number, wrong figure. We've been looking at 23 maybe gigawatts, whereas we already have 64. You see, so it's important to adjust, and that's the reason we want to have conversation like that. The one I'm doing right now today, to inform you as to what is the real situation on the ground, right? So high growth, low capital allocation. So that's the real bottleneck, and it's not sunlight which is the bottleneck. No, it's and it isn't demand which is the bottleneck, as you could see. It's cost of capital, currency risk, regulatory framework, which are designed for most of the time centralized utilities, whereby we know that distributed solar is accelerating, and also financing structure that struggle to really value distributed assets. And yet, the market is moving anyway, going faster. And that's the most powerful insight that I want to pick up from those two reports. Solar in Africa is advancing despite structural constraint, not because they have been resolved, but because people are saying, hey, we got to make things moving. What can we do? Right? So that is the one thing that I want to share with you. And I promise you that I wanted to share with you as well that the cost of storage, which was significantly dropping, and you could see, right? So it's gone from, and that's per mega, that's sorry, per kilowatt hour here. You see, it's gone from 265 to 112. You see, that's actually quite significant, right? So that's between 2017 and 2025. We talked about 8 year gap. So you could see how things are really improving fast, right, in the continent. And the decline of storage costs. Because what storage is doing here for solar, it's actually transforming solar from an intermittent source of power to a 24/7, right? So, which now obviously will start removing the fear that people have saying that we can't use solar as base load. You could see that graph is very significant. So I'm sure you could see that it kick off a little bit here around that time, 2022. Don't forget we had COVID, right? So definitely it had some impact and global supply chain challenges. But obviously it has resumed, it's dropped down significantly as well. So this, and it will continue to drop because that's what we've seen with solar, and that's what we've seen as well with storage. So I'm expecting things to get better over time as we keep on moving. So what do we do with this insight? So that is a question that one can ask me. So the first thing that we want to do, first of all, for me, it's about stop arguing which number is correct. Start asking yourself the question, so how do we build system that reflect distributed reality? So the second thing that you want to do, that you want to understand, the second insight is capital model must evolve. CNI solar plus storage needs faster underwriting, local currency financing, and also aggregation mechanism, policy clarity on wheeling and also net metering. So these are the kind of changes that we see really going to help make the system accelerate. And I'm hoping that actually people are actually following that, right? So this is what we need. And the third thing, so I must admit as well, so data system must modernize. So, if 60 plus gigawatts may already been installed, but policies still assume 20 something gigawatts, we are planning with outdated assumption. And it's a big difference. We talked about, a difference of, time free. So if you're looking at 20 as opposed to 60, it's not exactly the same thing. You agree with me, right? That's what I'm saying. So Africa transition may be the most decentralized in the world. Yeah, in the world. And that's why for me, I am so bullish and confident about renewables because no matter what people are saying out there, it is making its way. That's the thing. And that's not a weakness. It is a feature, right? I want to leave you with this because I don't want to do a long. I know you're going to get bored at some point in time, but let me leave you with this. So if Africa energy transition is already happening behind the meter, so what changes when capital, policy, and data finally catch up? Because when they do, and they will do, by the way, so Africa won't be just catching up, it may leapfrog. And this is where RIA role becomes critical, right? Not just as a commentator, right, of this. We are an eco bridge. We are an eco bridge to the market. So we're connecting investors with the opportunities, the policymaker with reality, developers with capital, and global market with African velocity. So if you are a policymaker, or if you are, for example, an investor, a developer, and you want to understand where Africa distributed energy market is really heading, guess what? Let's talk. To reach out to us, reach out to me, and reach out to us RIA. So we be more than happy to talk to you because waiting for the perfect clarity in emerging market usually mean missing the inflection point. And guess what? This might be one. I'll leave you with that. So let me know what you think about that. Drop your comments, and then feel free to reach out and share this video with people. And then I'll see you next week. Enjoy your time, and hopefully now you have clarity between the two reports. So thank you very much for your time. See you later, guys. Bye bye.